Welcome into Four Down Territory. I'm Kyle Madson, the managing editor of the Niners Wire. Joining me, as always, is Doug Farrar, the managing editor of Touchdown Wire. And Doug, welcome to the preseason, baby. We got actual football back.
Actual football games.
I'm so excited. I'm
Yes.
so excited. I think this is the first time you and I have gotten to do shows where we have actual football to talk about.
Yep. Actual football. Yes.
This is so exciting. You're one of the smartest people doing it, so I'm so excited to run through some of these preseason games
We
with
need
you.
to get out more and meet more people.
No, you know, I have, and my bar is admittedly low, but
Obviously.
but you're clearing
Clearly.
it. You
Your
are
bar's
clearing
like way
it
up.
with flying colors, my friend. But now that the first full week of the NFL preseason is in the books, we have, real football to talk about. Not hypotheticals, not draft prospects, not free agency, not camp, football. So unless you're one of those football versions of the people who are no fun at parties, that's me. That's me. Hello. Who insists that preseason doesn't matter at all, like no matter what. When you're watching preseason games, what are you looking for? Like, what are you hoping to get out of it?
Really, I'm for what I do, I'm doing what I do in the regular season. I'm watching tape, I'm looking at metrics, I'm trying to put it all together. I don't discount preseason performances because this or that team is playing its seventh stringers, because that generally aligns for both teams. But if one team is peaked to play its starters and it's playing a team that has no interest in doing so, I obviously take that into account. I mean, the Jets were like throwing Jerry Philbin and Mark Gastineau at Carolina's, 17th string offensive line. I'm going to take that into account. But it's like when I put up the pick six Eagles cornerback Eli Ricks had against the Ravens on Saturday night on social media, and I had all these people tell me that it was meaningless because Anthony Brown was staring his receiver down and whatever. And I mean, that's as maybe, but Ricks is an undrafted rookie playing in his first NFL game. He'd be forgiven for looking like the game was too big for him, and he didn't. I mean, he looked really good. I think 2 pass breakups, had that pick six. Had he not slipped on the turf about a minute after his pick six, he could have had another one. He was right there. So I'm watching how Ricks reacts to his receivers, how he reads the quarterback, what his movement skills are like, how he plays in press and off coverage. And then I'll cross-check his Alabama tape to see where he's improved. I remember when Brock Purdy became the starter for the Niners, and we're going to get into that subject in a minute. But I didn't really watch his Iowa State tape until he became the starter, and then I went back and I was able to see all the progressions, all the things he had learned. And so that was a regular season example, but a lot of what I'm doing now is I'm watching these guys play their first and second and third NFL games, whatever the schemes are, vanilla, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just kind of getting a sense in my head for, okay, Will McDonald all of a sudden looks like Lawrence Taylor, the Jets edge rusher. Well, how real is that? Who is he going up against? Well, if he puts a filthy, evil spin move on Ike Ekwonu, I'm going to pay attention. I don't care. So, that nuance is important. But if you want to insist that nothing that happens in the preseason matters, I guess I'll have to disagree with you. And so will every coach and executive in the NFL. And as they all know a lot more than I do, I'll stay on that side.
I think it matters in the way that you're talking about. I think for fans, it obviously does not matter because the wins and losses don't count. And I think for a lot of people, that's the scope that they view the game through. And that's fine. I'm not taking the 49ers off the Super Bowl contender mantle because they lost to the Raiders 34-7.
No.
That's where preseason doesn't matter for me. But there's all the things you just laid out. And then, okay, so Eli Ricks, for example, is dominant against backups. Well, great. That's what you want a good player to do. If there's somebody out there lighting it up against second and third stringers, great. That's a very good sign for that player, preseason or not, scheme dependent or not.
The near pick six he had, the almost second one was against Laquan Treadwell, who never really
veteran receiver.
Never really became what we thought he would become, but still, he's been in the league for a long time. He's supposed to know how to take a rookie cornerback and just light him up, and he didn't. So I digress.
Yeah, and that's where preseason has value to me. And then you can watch, and you can just see what players have feel and which ones don't.
Yeah,
I know it's a cross-sport reference here, but James Wiseman, former center for the Warriors, number 2 pick, you could tell when he was playing, like, man, that feel is just not quite there. Like, he's a little bit, and you can see that in NFL players too.
Yep.
If there's a guy just missing tackles or reading routes wrong or missing throws or not running through contact, those are all things that translate preseason or not. So from the minutia standpoint, I definitely think it has value. But for a fan that wants to know whether their team won or lost on Sunday, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. But a lot of fans want to analyze. They
Yeah.
they watch clips on Twitter and they are trying. A lot of fans, I mean, not every fan is just, with the foam finger in the beer and
Yeah.
screaming his or her head off.
Not
Fans
there's
want
anything wrong with that.
No, there's not. I do it in other sports. Like when I used to like the Mariners before they broke my spirit and, made me bitter. Fans want to extrapolate meaning from this too, and they want to get some context and some nuance and some understanding from it. So I think it matters as much as you want it to matter, but it does matter.
Thankfully, people have analysts like you to walk them through some of the nuance, and it's definitely appreciated. Let's jump over to second down, where I think
I teed this one up for you, man.
You did. No, you did.
Little hanging slider.
This was the number one kind of training camp battle for anybody looking through a national lens. The 49ers quarterback battle was the number one thing that people were interested in training camp. So Trey Lance yesterday gets sacked 4 times against the Raiders, or Trey Lance on Sunday, I should say, got sacked 4 times against the Raiders. He had 2 interceptions that got dropped.
One-handed for a touchdown, which was exceptional. That was awesome.
Ridiculous. We can talk more about that in a second. Sam Darnold, though, he looked more competent in that game. Yep. He played most of the third, or all of the third quarter and the first couple plays of the fourth quarter. And so in the battle between the 2 former third overall picks, Sam Darnold and Trey Lance, and then Mr. Irrelevant from last year, Brock Purdy, how do you think everything plays out?
I was recently honored to be on the Mina Kimes podcast, and the way I put it there was I explained what I think is the John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan organizational quarterback schism philosophy, which is going back to the decision to trade a king's ransom for the 3rd overall pick they needed to select Lance in the first place. I think that Lynch and Shanahan made a decision that is highly unusual for either one of them in this situation, because this as well as I do, or better than I do. Shanahan has never wanted a quarterback who would play outside his structure at all until he could prove that he could play in it completely. And he's got problems with Lance on both sides of the equation, because he's playing out of structure because he can't play in structure. And that's not all his fault. He's been hurt. Maybe he should have stayed another year, COVID, all this, stuff. So I think Purdy showed a lot in his rookie season that nobody expected at the end. I think Sam Darnold, honestly, Kyle, will be their starting quarterback this season. He's more mobile than people think, so he can run all of Shanahan's boot stuff. He's a legitimate red zone rushing threat. He had 5 rushing touchdowns for the Panthers in 2021. No one remembers that because it's Sam Darnold. Who cares? Blah, blah, blah. And he's got that arm that can make Y throwback happen with ease. He can throw across his body 20 or 30 yards and doesn't look ridiculous. He's not perfect, but he doesn't need to be. He needs to take Shanahan's playbook, pour it into his head, and not screw it up. And those things, I think, he can do better than any other quarterback on that roster right now.
So I don't necessarily disagree with you, but Brock Purdy is going to be their starter. Brock Purdy's starting week 1.
But is he starting week 18?
That I don't know. But come week 1, Brock Purdy's taking all the first team reps in camp. The team loves him. And based on what he put on tape last year, they scored 33.5 points a game when he was the starting quarterback. So he's going to get the first crack at it for sure. But to your point, it would not shock me if by week 6, they're 2-4 and Purdy's not playing well. I think they're going to look at Sam Darnold on that roster and go with him. Now, the whole Trey Lance aspect of this is it was understood when they drafted him in 2021 that he needed to play. He threw 290 passes or whatever it was between his senior year of college or high school and his college career. So he just needed to play games. And he hasn't gotten an opportunity to do that. He was the backup in year 1, and even then he got hurt in the preseason. And then when he did get a start, he got hurt. And then in year 2, he breaks his ankle and he's out for the season after the first drive of week 2.
Yeah.
And Purdy comes in at the end of last year and lights it up the way he did. And now Trey Lance is back in a position where, hey, he still needs to play, but he is on a team that is not going to afford him the opportunity to do that. So I think the way this all shakes out is Purdy to start the year as QB1, Sam Darnold's QB2, because maybe the team likes Lance's ceiling more, but they're trying to win a Super Bowl this year. They're all about urgency this year.
Yeah. They
And
should be.
if they think Sam Darnold is more ready, I totally agree. If they think Sam Darnold is more ready to lead the offense, if he has to come in week 1, then Sam Darnold's going to be the backup. Trey Lance will be QB3, and maybe there's a couple injuries and Lance comes in and he gets to start 8 games in a row and there's this massive improvement. And oh my God, the Niners fell backwards into a good quarterback. But I think he's going to wind up getting traded next offseason, Lance, that is. And barring injury and barring a massive regression, I think Purdy will be the quarterback for them this year.
I think with Lance, you go back to, again, the COVID year and the injuries. I always go back. I mean, the positives, he reminded me of Steve McNair coming out. I made that comp. I think Daniel Jeremiah also made that comp completely independent of each other. We just kind of came to McNair, which is pretty good. Sure. Borderline Hall of Famer. But that Central Arkansas game, I think that was his last college game.
Yeah, it's showcase game.
15 of 30, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And Central Arkansas was throwing some stuff at him, man. Like, quarters with safety movement, and Tampa too. And even then, his head was kind of exploding. So this was a guy, we talk about his ceiling, but there are floors between his ceiling and his floor. So and again, not all his fault. Sometimes you just have injury misfortune, and that's the way it goes. But yeah, I don't know what Trey Lance's future is at this point. I'm sorry to say that because I thought he was a really exciting prospect, but so many things have to, especially at quarterback. My God, so many things have to line up for success in the NFL. You have to bring all of yourself into it, and there's so many things not of your own volition that also need to line up. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, you see on Sunday. You see the flashes of playmaking, right? There was the little dump off to Willie Snead where it looked like he was going to scramble, and then on the run, just kind of a weird arm angle, got it to Snead for a first down. Like that's great, and you like to see that. And then he shows off the arm strength. They got the ball with 27 seconds left before the half, and he helped him get in field goal range with a couple of downfield throws. Like, you like to see that, but then there's holding onto the ball too long. There's bringing the eyes down and looking at pass rushers. There's escaping clean pockets. That's the kind of stuff that, I mean, maybe it comes out with more play, and I want to see him start 6-8 games in a row before I write him off, but it's not going the right direction to be totally clear.
Yeah, I also wonder if he would be better with a head coach or an offensive shot caller, and of course Shanahan's both. A guy who's more comfortable with that randomness, because Kyle is not. And he is the best offensive designer of his era. He is the most potent disruptor of defenses of his era. I will brook no argument. You can throw McVay or whoever else you want in there. He's the guy. So he has a right to say, hey, this is my system. This is the way you do it. And I want a guy who's just going to do it. I mean, like I said at the beginning, they took a shot on, well, what if we could take all this amazing Shanahan stuff and pour it into a guy like when I think he was the Redskins. I think he was a QB coach under his dad. And he had Robert Griffin.
He was the OC
for a little bit. Yeah, he was the OC. And, maybe he was thinking back to that, like, well, what if I could do that now?
I think
that doesn't always work.
Well, and remember, too, you bring up RG3, but I think he was thinking more, hey, Steve Young, who his dad coached in San Francisco, John Elway, who his dad won Super Bowls with in Denver. I think that's kind of what he was hoping for. And like I said, maybe he gets there, but the Niners aren't the team to give him that opportunity because they can't live with the growing pains right now.
No, they can't.
So Trey Lance didn't do much to help himself in week 1. What players did do something to help themselves in week 1 of this particular preseason? I
have 3 guys that stood out. Well, a lot of guys. I did a Secret Superstars article this morning. A lot of guys stood out, but I always liked Dorian Thompson-Robinson when he was the Steelers quarterback, and I like him even more now that he's got 2 preseason games with the Browns. Yeah. DTR had always been capable of making explosive plays with his arm and his feet, and based on that preseason action, I think he's cleaned up his process in tight window throws, especially in red zone situations. You watch his college tape, and that's kind of where the mystery meat was. There would be some amazing red zone throws, and then what? To quote Chris Berman, what? Yes, it's early, but I think he has the potential to beat out Josh Dobbs, who completely misfired on what would have been a touchdown pass to one of your guys. For the Browns' number 2 spot behind Deshaun Watson. And if Watson can't make more of things needed in 2022, who knows how far he can go down the road. Rookie Malik Cunningham of the Patriots is in a far less defined quarterback situation, and he might be able to take advantage. It seems that there's not much of a difference in the minds of the coaches between Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi in Foxborough, and based on what Cunningham showed against the Texans, maybe he makes that process even more complicated. Cunningham completed 3 of 4 passes for 19 yards, but he had a great rollout throw to the end zone, and Trey Nixon should have caught that, and we would be talking about it, the whole time had that happened. He also had 34 rushing yards on 5 attempts, and his ability to juke defenders all over the field. This is a guy to watch the rest of the preseason. And, he lined up also at wide and in the slot, and he overcame a face mask penalty in which they pretty much took his head off. So that was impressive. Speaking of the Texans, Nathaniel Tank Dell, one of my favorite pre-draft guys. I love those water bug receivers. He was discounted by many because he's 5'8", 175, but he showed against the Patriots that he's a matchup nightmare all over the field. He can take a simple slant to the house like a guy you'd expect with the size-speed ratio, but he's also more than capable of getting open against all kinds of coverage. You can see why C.J. Stroud was telling us about Dell in May after a few minicamp practices. Mm-hmm. And while Stroud's debut was less than stellar, I think Dell showed okay, you got to watch out for this kid. Kyle, what about you?
I have a rule with players named Tank. If you're a big player named Tank, I'm out. If you're a small player named Tank, I'm in. And that's the rule I live by in Tank Dell.
So where does Tank Bigsby fall in that? Because he's kind of mid-sized.
TBD.
Okay.
TBD. I need to go watch.
Okay.
But for he falls in a gray area. There's gray areas in life, Doug, and he's in there. So for me, it starts with Packers quarterback Jordan Love, and not that he was in danger of losing his starting job or anything like that, but I feel better about him in this Packers offense after watching him in Cincinnati. He was 7 of 10. It was 46 yards and a touchdown. Ideally, he'll push the ball downfield a little bit more in the regular season, but in Matt LaFleur's offense, there's layups. You have to hit the layups. We're just talking about Trey Lance. That's his big issue, is the layups are not layups for him. But they were for Jordan Love. And like I said, maybe he'll push the ball down the field more in the regular season when they're game planning and they're drawing up shot plays. But for now, you'll take 7 of 10, 46 yards and a touchdown. And I feel better now about the Packers offense than I did going into the preseason for sure. Another player that jumped out, going to go back to the Browns here, is wide receiver Austin Watson. Yeah. So Watson's last 3 professional football teams before Cleveland were the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Memphis Showboats, and the Birmingham Stallions. All those sound like fake football teams, right?
Yeah.
He's 6'3", 210. He has 6 catches, 71 yards on 8 targets in their loss to Washington. But consistency is key for some of these kind of lesser-known guys. And I thought he created separation really well. He found space. And like we talked about earlier, the competition level isn't as high, but he looked really dominant against these second and third and maybe in some cases 4th-string guys that he's playing against. And that's really what you want to see. So I'm really intrigued to see him moving forward.
Well, against the Commanders, by the way, he had the delightfully named Rashard Wildgoose beaten on a vertical route, and Josh Dobbs threw the ball into section H. So, that would have been a touchdown. So, there you
go. What? Say that name again, please.
Rashard Wildgoose.
I'm getting his jersey.
Yes.
I'm buying that jersey tomorrow.
We'll see that on Foreign territory next week.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to do the express shipping. I'm going to pay extra to get it here.
Wear it backwards so we can see Wild Goose on the shot.
Okay, you got it. Finally, Chargers running back Elijah Dotson. He was super impressive. He played 7 snaps, okay? He played 7 snaps. He got 6 carries and had 92 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he created explosive plays. There wasn't a ton of yards after contact. I think it was less than 2 yards after contact per carry. You'd like to see that number tick up more. But, man, they just couldn't touch him. And he's creating explosives in an NFL where creating explosive plays is the name of the game on offense. So Joshua Kelly, who's been there for a couple years, nice day, 54 yards on 9 carries. But I have a hard time believing that Elijah Dotson's only going to get 7 carries in the Chargers' next preseason game because, man, that was super impressive, and I want to see more.
Interesting guy. He was basically kind of a rotational back at 4 years at Sacramento, moved to Northern Colorado. I mean, okay.
Yeah, hey, Sac State, Stingers up, baby.
And he comes in and it's like, whoa. And how about the Chargers? How about CJ Okoye? They got him in the transfer program from Nigeria. Never played a game of organized football in his life, and he got a sack.
Tell
that kid the preseason doesn't mean anything.
Put that into perspective. The 49ers have an offensive lineman who came in through the International Pathway Program from Mexico. His name's Alfredo Gutierrez. Gutierrez came in 2021, didn't play a snap in the preseason. Last year, in like garbage time, in a play where they would have kneeled down, the Niners wanted to get Alfredo Gutierrez a rep. So they put him in at left tackle and ran a toss to his side so he could get out and move and block. And it was a huge deal that he got on the field.
Yeah.
And so for Okoye to, in his first ever football game, to get out and get a sack, I don't care if it's against a high school team. That's super, super impressive that he did that.
Plus, again, not a game of organized football in this kid's life. They lined him up at nose, 3, and edge.
That's wild.
20 or whatever snaps.
That's,
he made super superstars just because of that. I don't care. Preseason, my butt. Shut up. I'm talking about this guy.
Learning to play 3 positions in a sport you've never played before on an organized level in 2 weeks of camp is maybe the most impressive thing any player's done this summer. Let's end on a downer note here. What players had, you know what? No, where I'm going to spin this. What players had better hope for a serious redo after their week 1 performances? Because, hey, you got another week. What guys are you telling, hey, you got another week to get out there?
Well, I will include the Giants in this as well, but the offensive line coaches for the Titans and the Panthers have a lot of work to do this week. It's often said that the gap between starting and backup offensive linemen is more stark than at any other positions, and you really see that in the preseason because the second and third level guys are just like, whoa. The Titans offensive line allowed 8 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, and 4 tackles for loss against a Bears defense that, not a lot of edge there. Unique Ngakoue wasn't out there yet. And backups like Jalen Duncan and Zach Johnson were particularly vulnerable. Perhaps more worrisome was the beatdown Bryce Young endured in his first game with the Panthers against the Jets' dominant defensive line. And again, the Jets were throwing all their guys at this. Young officially took a sack. He had a few quarterback hits, but he was under constant pressure. I mean, it was bad. And, I'm not going to say the size thing doesn't matter to me unless he gets his brains beaten in, and then it matters. The problem was that the starters were having a rough time, especially left tackle Ike Ekwonu, who looked really vulnerable in ways you don't want to see from a guy who gave up 6 sacks in his rookie season and was selected 6th overall in the 2022 draft. Those are 2 6s you don't want matching up. Yeah. I will say that Ekwonu was good with run blocking against the Jets. The pass pro was a problem, which may in the end be what he is. And, that's just something they got to watch out for. But I would say overall, a lot of offensive line coaches they're drinking the coffee and they're staying up all night because there was some bad pass pro out there in week 1.
Yeah, it was tough across the league for sure. Nobody in the NFL wants their debut back more than 49ers kicker Jake Moody. So normally this wouldn't come up. If the Niners had taken Moody in the 7th round, it would have skipped this entirely. But San Francisco used the number 99 overall pick on Moody. And if you're using a top 100 pick, when you only have 2 in the draft, by the way, on a kicker, he needs to be outstanding. Moody's been great in camp. He's missed from 43 and 63 in camp. But other than that, he's been money. In Sunday's loss to the Raiders, he pulled a 40-yarder way left. And then this is the most worrying thing to me. He misses way left from 40. They bring him in to try a 58-yarder, and then he pushed it way right. It wasn't even in the same zip code. So he missed both directions. That's a worry for me. And the 49ers are hoping to get a Justin Tucker with that 99th pick, and after one preseason game, it kind of looks like they might have gotten a Roberto Aguayo. But there's 2 more. There's 2 more to go, and he's been good in practice, so maybe it was just nerves. Maybe he'll be money from here out, and everything's going to be fine. But
apparently his demeanor is just awesome.
Oh, he is locked in on the demeanor front.
He carries himself. Just to bust in, I'm looking at the guys who were taken after Moody, and I'm like, oh, Cameron, just the guys I liked. Cameron Latu, Mekhi Blackman, DeJuan Jones, who was really good in 2 games with the Browns. Clark Phillips.
Speaking of
there's a lot of guys here. Oof.
Speaking of Cam Latu, since you just brought him up, he's another guy who wants his debut back. 1 target that he juggled and then fumbled after he hauled it in, and this is after having a bunch of drop problems in practice. Not a great debut for Cameron Latu, but CJ Stroud is another player who may want to redo his preseason opener. And I don't know if there's many alternate versions of that game for CJ Stroud, just because in a game where you're not game planning and you're just kind of going mano a mano, our guys against your guys, and your guys are the Texans, that's not going to work out very well for anyone. He threw 4 passes. He completed 2 of them for 13 yards. He took a sack. He threw an interception, had a 17.7 quarterback rating in 2 series. So, like I said, the Texans leave a lot to be desired in terms of talent, and that's really going to show in these preseason games where there's no game planning going on. So it's a hard preseason lesson for Stroud that I'm sure he would like to do over again. But like I said, I'm not sure how much different the preseason is going to go for him. I want to see him when they're game planning and really actually trying to win a game.
Well, I mean, he explained, and both sides explained what happened, and basically Stroud missed the hook guy coming down, and he was reading the tight end, and there was Tank Dell. If they had 11 Tank Dells, they'd win every game, clearly. But yeah, 11 Tank Dells or 11 Mike Ditkas. There's your Super Bowl matchup. That's another. He's hanging in the pocket too long. He's not seeing things, and you expect that to improve. But I was a little surprised at the level to which he looked overwhelmed, even with because Laramie Tunsil's not out there. You don't have your guys, but I wasn't like, oh no, I got to like throw my priors out because he was QB1 in this class for me.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, okay, welcome to the NFL. Now we'll see what you do.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me is, okay, week 2, now that the cobwebs have gotten dusted off, he's gotten to see what it looks like. What does it look like now in week 2? Is there a little bit of an adjustment? I'm thinking there will be because I'm with you. I think Stroud is a heck of a player.
Well, Thursday, we start with Browns and Eagles, and we'll see what happens.
I'm fired up. Can't wait to talk about that with you next week, Doug. Everybody tune in to 4 Down Territory. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.